All right, thank you everyone for joining today for the webinar. Just to make sure that everyone can hear my voice and see my screen, if you can go to the question box, which is part of the features of our webinar tool, and just type yes into the question box so that I know that everyone is able to see and hear my voice. The question box is a tool that we will use throughout the webinar because I'll be presenting throughout. I may pause a little and take a break so that I can check the questions and make sure that I've answered them, or I may answer them at the end of a section. So if I'm not able to answer something right away, please just wait and I will make sure to get back to you either during the webinar or right at the end. Today we'll be covering information about PARCC and DC Science. Most of you, I believe, are new test coordinators this year, so welcome. My name is Cassie Leinid. I oversee the administration of the PARCC assessment, and PARCC and DC Science are very similar this year, so we're going to be talking through both of those as we go through the presentation today. There may be a few more people joining us, but we're going to get started. For your reference, I know that there are some weather issues today, so I wanted to make sure everyone was aware that there will be a recording of this webinar as well as the one that's coming up next. In an hour after this webinar finishes, there's the option to join in on a second webinar about Pearson Access Next, which is just called Pearson Access Next 101. We're going to go through the system and talk a little bit about it. If you are not able to join for the second, but you're interested in listening in or viewing it later, as I mentioned, we will be recording both of these so that they're available for anyone who is unable to attend one or the other, who wants to look back to review the information, or has any issue where they need to leave today. That is perfectly fine, not a problem at all. All right, let's get started. Today we're going to talk through an introduction to PARCC and DC Science. We're going to go chronologically through test administration, from planning to administering the tests to closing out the tests, and then just talk through a few next steps that may be helpful as a new test coordinator for you this year beyond this training. PARCC and DC Science are the assessments we'll be covering today. If you are working with other assessments, there's certainly a wide range of training available for those, but that'll be the focus of our conversation for today. The PARCC assessment is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. It is our assessment in DC that measures English language arts and mathematics standards, the Common Core state standards. We've had it for a few years now, so some of you may be very familiar with it, may have been part of it in a different way, even though you're new to this role. The DC Science assessment measures the next generation science standards. There was a kind of different iteration, a different version of the DC Science assessment that we had a while ago. We did not have a DC Science assessment last year. The one that we have this year is a new version, so there's lots of new resources. If your science teachers haven't had a chance to explore them, I do encourage them to take a look. We will have practice tests up soon so that people can take a look at what the assessment will look like. But we have tried to streamline the PARCC and DC Science assessments so that the administration of them is very similar since they're done through the same system. So the PARCC Mathematics and ELA assessments are taken each spring by students in grades 3 through 8. They're also taken once in high school based on course enrollment. So it depends on which courses students take, what grade they'll take it in, but they do take it once in high school. DC Science is taken each spring by students in grades 5 and 8, and it's also taken once in high school and attached to biology coursework. So when students are taking biology, they'll take the DC Science assessment again in high school. If you or your school or LEA have any questions about participation, particularly for high school and how that works and which assessments you should or want to be taking, there is some flexibility, so it's interesting to look into. Our participation policy document is linked here, and I will make sure that you get a copy of these slides when we're finished, so that you can click that link or visit our website to get information about the participation policy. All right, so the PARCC and DC Science assessments are managed through the same system as I mentioned before. That system on the administrative end is called Pearson Access Next. If you are running the assessment as a test coordinator, if you are administering to students as a test administrator, the Pearson Access Next system is what you'll be using. When students take the test, they use a system called TestNav 8. So that's something that gets put onto student devices as an application, and students will take the assessment in that application. So there's two different names, two different systems, one for management and one for student testing. OSSE requires each school to submit something called a school test security plan. If you've already attended test security training, you're very familiar with this. Shannon does a presentation on it in the school test security training event, which is a required event for LEA test coordinators. The school test security plan gives us a sense of important details that you'll be doing during testing. It allows you to kind of go through step by step and check off some things that we require. And it's submitted online. It is due 15 business days prior to the first day of testing, which means it's kind of on a rolling basis. If you're starting testing the first day of PARCC testing, it would be due 3 weeks before that. If you're starting 2 weeks into the window, it would be due 3 weeks before that. So the calculation of that date is based on your start date, so it'll vary a bit for each of you, but 15 business days prior to the first day of testing. Schools are not able to begin testing until that plan is approved. So do make sure that you plan in advance and you get it approved. We do give you feedback pretty quickly once we've received it, but sometimes we do ask you to make edits or adjustments if the information is not as thorough as we need it to be, or if the information has an error in it or some sort of policy you've created that we want to let you know that is not possible. We will offer feedback on that pretty quickly, but sometimes there is some editing that needs to happen. So do plan to be attentive to that and make sure that updates are made as quickly as possible so that you can begin testing once it's approved. All right, now that we have kind of a basic sense of these two assessments, we're going to go through that chronological view of test administration. We'll start with planning. The steps it takes to plan these two assessments include attending training. Like I said, the test security training is something you may have done before, and then this training is also a good start. We're going to talk through assigning roles to the staff at your school, registering students to test, setting up technology for testing, creating a testing schedule, training your authorized personnel, which would be the staff at your school, creating test sessions, and documenting your school test security plans. Attending training is our starting point. Test security training is a requirement. The other trainings that we offer are all optional, but a great support if you need help with this or you feel like it's a whole new world for you and you haven't worked with a PARCC assessment before or don't have anyone at your school who has. We have the trainings that we're offering today. We also have some workshops that we're doing around the student registration file, as well as creating test sessions. And there's also a range of other opportunities for other tests if you're managing any of those. So do visit our website. There's a training schedule, as you see here, that's up on the website with lots of links that you can click on to register for any trainings that are the most appropriate for you and of the most interest. All right. Once you've attended training, you'll want to make sure that you have a team together who's working with you to make this a success, and those would be the staff at your school, and each of them will be assigned a different role. As an LEA test coordinator, you'll be overseeing the entire process for your LEA. If you are a one-school LEA, you may be both the LEA coordinator and the school coordinator, which is perfectly common and totally fine. If you do have a number of schools, you'll want to assign a school test coordinator to each school so that there's someone on the ground there who's working with the staff who really knows what's going on, and you'll train them directly. The school test coordinators will work with a number of staff on the school level. The special education coordinator who's going to work with them to make sure that students have all of the accommodations and accessibility features and materials and resources they need based on their IEPs, 504 plans, EL plans, really setting up a structure for student success there. Your technology coordinator is going to help you out with making sure that the systems are set up, the student devices are ready. So that's also a key person to have on your side. Test administrators are mostly going to be people in your school who are staff that will be presenting the test to students. So their training will be just about kind of going through the assessment process on the day of testing, preparing a little in advance, but their role will mostly exist during the testing window, as well as proctors who would be assisting them in the classroom. And then authorized personnel is a term that we use to kind of encompass all of these people, including yourself, but also includes anyone who may be in a role that they'll be popping in and out of a classroom. If there is an issue, they might be part of the testing process, but don't have one of these designated specific roles. A lot of times this happens for administrators at the school level. They want to make sure that they're part of testing, they know what's going on, they can go into the rooms where testing is happening. If they're going to be accessing that space and working with students in any way around testing, they would need to go through training. And once you go through training, you are technically authorized personnel. All right, so we did talk through most of these. Here's some additional details. These are also available in a document that I attached to the presentation called Coordinating Statewide Assessments. It has information about all of the assessments that we give in the District of Columbia through OSSE, and provides a detailed list of kind of the tasks that each person is responsible for each of these roles. When you're assigning staff, you will need to document it in a couple different places, one of which is that school test security plan we talked about before. OSSE will need to know who is part of this authorized personnel group at your school, who's been trained, and what roles they'll be playing. You'll also put it in something called your school test security file, which is a physical paper file where you're going to be keeping lots of documents. And if you've gone to test security training, you've heard about this. If not, you'll hear more about it there. The other place you'll want to assign roles is within the Pearson Access Next system. And this isn't necessarily for documentation, it's for access. You're basically creating users in the system in a structure that they're able to access the information they need to do the job they have. So if they're a school coordinator, they may be accessing lots of information for their school, setting up users, setting up students. If they're just a test administrator, that role that you'd assign them as a test administrator would mostly just allow them to administer the test to their group of students. So there's different levels and different types of roles, but you'll want to set them up in the system so that they're able to access the information they need. All right, once your staff is assigned, the next thing to do is to make sure your students are properly registered. We did recently open a window for this process. OSSE registers students in grades 3 through 8, which means all students in grades 3 through 8 for PARCC, and then students in grade 5 and 8 for DC Science. So we've pre-registered all those students in the system for you. There may be some situations where you had a student transfer in or a student who's new and you need to just double check and make sure that everyone is there. So we give you a window to verify that, which runs through February 22nd. You'll do that verification. Also, if you have students who are in 7th and 8th grade, you may be making some adjustments for advanced mathematics courses. There are students who are able to take advanced mathematics courses based on our participations policy. And so if you have any students like that, you'd want to adjust and take them maybe out of 8th grade math and put them in Algebra 1 if that's the course they're taking. So again, check into that participation policy for more information. High school students, as I mentioned earlier, are enrolled in the assessment based on their courses. This means that OSSE does not have information to enroll them. We don't know which students are taking geometry, which students are not. And it can vary the grade that they're in when they do so. So high school registration is completed by the LEA. You're going to look at the courses your students are registered in, look at the participation policy, figure out what your LEA policy is, and then enroll students accordingly. Registration is completed in the Pearson Access Next system. Again, that's kind of our management area where we do all of the work on our end. And it's going to most often be done through a spreadsheet called the Student Registration and Personal Needs Profile. You'll hear me and others on my team reference this as the SRP&P in our communications and in conversations that we have with you. The fields in this are going to include some general information like which LEA and school the student belongs to, student name, student identification number, birth date, demographic information. It's also going to include which tests they're taking. It's going to include accommodations and accessibility features. So it's a very important piece of the puzzle. Directions for completing this can be found in Pearson Access Next. There's a guide that goes through and gives you information about every single column and every accommodation and every field and how it needs to be filled out. So that's a very important guide to have. It's also been attached to a number of our recent bulletins. If you have not pulled it down yet to download to your computer, please do so. It's a pretty important file. We'll also have an SRP&P workshop on February 11th for those who want to go through this process with me and potentially some other staff from my team. We'll sit down, just kind of go through the process, answer questions, and really try and make sure that everything is where it needs to be, or at least you have the answers you need so you can complete it on your own soon after. I mentioned that part of the registration file is the personal needs portion. Personal needs profile is all about accommodations and accessibility features. When we talk about accommodations for PARCC and DC Science, we're talking about something that requires a student to have an IEP, a 504 plan, or an EL plan. Accommodations can only be assigned based on students who have those plans and have it designated in the plan. So these are the kinds of features that students are legally entitled to through these plans. When we talk about accessibility features, we're talking about something more universal. Some accessibility features are actually just built into the system in this big purple section of the model that you see here on the screen. We have things in the system like highlighter tools, answer masking, all sorts of things that just kind of any student can use in the system if they'd like to. There's other accessibility features that need to be assigned because not every student needs them or necessarily wants to have them on their screen. This might be something like math text-to-speech that has the ability to have a student have the assessment read aloud to them through the computer. And for students who may be extremely low readers, but we want to give them an equitable opportunity to be successful in the math assessment, they may be assigned math text-to-speech, which is assigned in the system in advance. They're taught how to use it, and they're able to kind of click through the assessment and not have reading hinder their ability to complete the math assessment successfully. So there's an entire guide that gives you tons of details about this. This is where your special education coordinator really comes in as a key partner to help you understand how all of these things attach to the IEPs, 504 and EL plans, and really assign these equitably to students so they have the best supports available to them for success. When you're working with your special education coordinator, you're going to be creating policies. As I said, for accommodations, you're basically going to be providing students with whatever is in their IEP plan, their EL plan, their 504 plan. You know, those things are requirements. When it comes to accessibility features, we want to make sure that there's a plan in place for how those are given. We don't want, you know, one classroom to have a teacher who assigns them to everyone and another classroom where no one gets them. We want to be thoughtful about how they're assigned across the school. So you may want to set something like a reading level and say students at or below this reading level are going to be receiving the text-to-speech for math. Again, that's just one example. There's many accessibility features. Some of them involve students' location for testing so that they have space or individual space to work, or working with a familiar adult if a student has a challenge with, you know, having trouble in testing environments and they really would be better off working with an individual they're really close to and comfortable with. Those things can be accommodated for. But you put practices into place and set some policies before you start giving those out to students so that they're given out to really match what the students are and should be receiving during testing while they're in the classroom environment. We want it to be similar to what they're used to, not a whole bunch of new features that confuse them or a whole bunch of new things that may pose additional challenges. Make sure that students also have time to practice. Like I said, the features are electronic, many of them, and we want to make sure that students are able to. Sorry, I just saw that I'm going in and out a little on the sound. I apologize. I will see if I can fix that here. Let me know if it's any better over the next few minutes. All right. Yep, just noting that students should be able to practice those accommodations and accessibility features. All right. So the SRPMP file, we want to make sure that that is completed with enough time for Pearson to process all the information accurately and get materials out to you guys. So materials for some students who have accommodations like a paper test or a large print test or a human reader script need to be sent to schools in advance. And so the SRPMP does need to be completed for accommodations by February 22nd. If student accommodations change after that point, we certainly have opportunities for additional orders so that if an IEP shifts and we need an additional paper booklet, we can make orders and accommodate for that. But the bulk of the information, we want to have that out in advance to the schools so that everything is where it needs to be. Accessibility features do not require this information, or sorry, do not require these materials. So the information can be added at a different time. And we say that that needs to be added before your school test security plan is submitted, because the school test security plan is kind of the final threshold before we approve things and tell you that you're ready to test. And we do need those things to be in the system before that point. All right. Materials are going to be shipped to your schools around March 13th. PARCC and DC Science materials may arrive separately. If you're expecting both, do not worry if you get a package that just has one set of materials and not the other. They should be arriving soon. Included in these materials are not just accommodated test materials, but also test manuals and return shipping materials. So you may get a bunch of labels to send things back and package bans and all these things. Count everything, make sure everything that is listed is there, lock away anything that is secure, which would be any of your test booklets, human reader scripts, anything that has any sort of testing information on it does need to be locked away and secured based on our policies for test security. And again, you'll get more information about that at test security training if you haven't already. Each school is going to receive manuals. We actually just released those this week, so they are available online if you'd like to take a look at them in advance, but we will send you hard copies with that shipment in March. When the manuals arrive at your school, you can take a look through them, give some to test administrators if they're interested in looking at more information about what their responsibilities will be. And then the manuals, as I mentioned, are available online for you if you'd like to take a look at them. All right, setting up for technology. So Pearson Access Next is used by LEA staff to manage the students' testing in the system. So we want to make sure that everyone is set up. And then we also have the TestNav 8 program. The TestNav 8 program is what we need to put on student devices. There is an application for that. There's a couple different things in the past where people had been working with web browsers. They tend to pose a lot more challenges. So I would highly recommend working on downloading the app to student devices. Make sure that your student devices are compatible. Most of them are, but there are some specifications about setting things up. So your technology coordinator will come in very helpful there. And just checking through to make sure that the student devices are prepared before testing. One of the things that the app will do is actually kind of lock down the computer when students open it so that they can only be accessing that application, because obviously during testing, that's all we want them to do. So feel free to practice using it through the practice site. You're also welcome to run kind of a trial run with students on practice items in the practice site so that you get a sense of how it'll work. Proctor caching is a neat term that I learned when I started working with PARCC and DC Science. It's basically a way for a computer that is local at your school to store information so that it pulls the information more quickly to student computers during testing. One of the biggest fears around having technology as part of our assessment is that we want to make sure that the students don't have a delay, they're not waiting for information. Proctor caching allows that process to move more quickly. So if there's information for all of the tests that's locally stored through one of the computers at your school, the Proctor cache machine, as they refer to it, it helps it go out more quickly to student devices while everyone is testing at the same time. So it's a pretty easy step, but something that'll help things run more smoothly for your students while testing. Infrastructure trials, I mentioned a little bit about this before, having students practice and having potentially your school practice to make sure that you have the bandwidth you need and that technology is set up and TestNav applications are running effectively. We want to make sure that all of that is ready before testing. It's also an opportunity to have students practice taking the test and get a sense of the tools, those accommodations and accessibility features they'll be using. So the infrastructure trial is basically a practice run, and it is recommended, particularly if you have any sort of new devices, if you're a school who's new to this, if you're adding an additional grade and not sure how that many new students will impact the assessment process for you. This is a great way to check. Supportive technology may be needed for some students with accommodations. These are unique machines and features that don't impact everyone, but if you do have it, feel free to reach out to us. Michael Craig is our assessment specialist for special populations and knows a bit about that and can help you with setup. And also the Pearson team can help you with setup. Some students have devices and we want to make sure that they can use those appropriately if they're special attachments or pieces of the puzzle for their accommodations. Creating a testing schedule. Below is a chart that outlines the grades, the number of units for each subject, and the testing time for each subject. This varies greatly. As you can see here, we have some students in 3rd grade taking 4 math units with 60 minutes each, students in high school taking 3 math units at 90 minutes each. We want to make sure that everyone is able to schedule appropriately for each unit of the assessment. To make sure that we continuously supply information for the assessment items, the PARCC and DC Science assessments include field test items, and those are basically us assessing the item rather than assessing the student. For math and science, they're embedded in the assessment, so we don't need to worry about any sort of changes. For ELA, there are some differences because of the structure of the units. And so for ELA administration, we actually have an additional unit that becomes a field test unit that's given only to some grades. That's grades 4 and 7 this year. As you saw highlighted on the schedule in the previous slide, they were highlighted in yellow because they have 4 units of ELA instead of 3. So do account for that in your schedule. When you're creating a testing schedule, you'll want to take into account the information that's needed for your school test security plan. And below is a list, kind of a sample document of what you might be using to create your school test security plan schedule. You can use other formats if you want, but this is the basic one that we give you. And we do need to make sure that all of the topics that are listed here are accounted for, even if you use your own format. This helps us in terms of understanding when schools are testing, when we kind of have the highest need, and also helps us when we have monitors who come to visit schools during testing, which we'll talk about later. All right, once you have a better sense of the schedule and the structure and some more information, you'll want to train your authorized personnel. We at OSSE train the LEA test coordinators through test security training and then the other opportunities we offer. You'll be training the school test coordinators, and they will be training the staff at the school. The structure is a little flexible. If you are both LEA and school test coordinator, you can train your staff directly. Even if you're not and you'd like to be present for it, feel free to do that. We want to make sure that the information is communicated clearly. So feel free to use this structure to fit the needs of your school or LEA. Authorized personnel are really part of this process to make sure that the testing environment is secure. School test coordinators are responsible for training them on test security and test administration. They're also going to be provided with a test security notification statement. It has a lot of the legal and technical information around policies for testing, and it is a requirement that they receive it before they become a test administrator or someone who's part of the testing process. It's available on our website. We'll talk about it at test security training, but do make sure this is part of your plan when you train your staff, that they're going to be coming to the event, and receiving this is a huge piece of the puzzle. All right. The next step is to go in the system and create test sessions. These kind of organize students into groups. They would normally be a class. Sometimes you may have 3 students from a class who are kind of testing as a small group with an accommodation. There may be 1 student testing individually. So any student group that's testing together becomes a test session. They're assigned a person who is going to be their test administrator, who's going to give them the test, and they're grouped together in the system so that the test administrator can click a button and begin all their tests at the same time. This is created through that SRPMP file upload. You can also create them manually, but usually they're done in that upload that has the guide with all the information about the columns and how to fill out that detailed information. Once your sessions are created, you and your staff will manage them during testing. You'll see something like we have on the screen here on the upper right, where there's a bar that shows the progress of students, which ones maybe actively testing, which ones may have completed testing. You'll also see a little box that has a lock and an unlock. That's how you open and close the units. When you want students to take Unit 1, you unlock it, and then you lock it back at the end of the session when students are done with Unit 1, so that students can only go to the specific unit that you want them to be testing in at that time. You'll also be printing student testing tickets. These are a very secure material. It's basically like a test book, but a digital version, because it gives you a password and access to student tests. So you'll be creating these by printing them from the system. You'll be putting them in groups and having your test administrators sign them in and out from you each day when they go through testing. So they'll come to get them from the test coordinator, they'll sign a page that says they've received them, and they'll return them at the end of testing so that they can be locked up when they're not in use. Test sessions do need to be created in a specific format. It's listed here with the session name, including the subject, the grade, the test administrator's initials, and then at the end we list R for regular sessions and M if you end up doing any makeup sessions. We also have to have the test administrator's name attached to the session so we know who that is rather than just the initials that are in the first piece for the session. So we do that by putting their last name dot first name into the system as well. The best way for OSSE and LEAs to communicate about test security is to ensure that each school is prepared to test, and we do that through that test security plan. So you're going to create a file for your test security. The file is an actual physical file kept at your school, and the security plans are submitted digitally to OSSE. So you'll have kind of this digital communication with us and then a physical file that lives at your school. Coordinators submit those school test security plans for us to approve. We give you feedback, which may be revision requests or approvals, and once you are approved, that's when you can begin testing. Again, the school test security file is there to document staff involvement, testing schedules, any incident reports or notes that people give you about things that happened can go in there. And those are maintained at the school for up to 4 years. We request that you have them for 4 years. In case there was any sort of investigation or concern, we'll be able to come back and look at your notes and your information to have the best possible picture of what happened at your school that year. As I mentioned before, school test security plans are submitted digitally through QuickBase and must be approved prior to testing. And the school test security plans must be submitted to OSSE 15 business days before your first day of testing. Here's a list of the things that are in the school test security plan. You will get information about all of this and have a detailed printout, so do not worry, but wanted to give you a sense of what's expected there. Some of it's kind of a checklist where you check off and say, yes, we've done these things. Other things are like your testing schedule. Some things are more logistical, like what date are you starting, what date are you stopping. So lots of information in there. Do give yourself time to prepare for this. All right, we're at a pausing point. I'm just going to take a look at some of the questions that have come up so that I can answer those. So someone was asking about setting up students who are taking different, for different grades in terms of a test schedule. It seems like they're asking about rows and columns. If this is about the SRPMP, a student gets registered in the SRPMP file for one test as one row. They don't get registered by unit, so it would just be one row of the file. If that wasn't your question, feel free to clarify and I can answer that. Great, it looks like I got it. I have someone who asked about how to get access to Pearson Access Next. You can email me directly, cassie.linett@dc.gov. My email should be something that you receive through the NJ Bulletin or other things. I can get you set up if you don't already have it. I have a question about, yes, the school test security file is digital in our system. Or the school test security plan is digital in our system, but the file is actually a physical file. So at the end of testing, we do ask that you print out what is in the digital system so that there's a copy of that in the school test security file as well. And the sign in sign out sheets for testing tickets are provided. They're part of the testing manual. So that information should be available for you when you read through that document. All right, I think I got all the questions. If you have them, keep them coming. When we take another quick break, I will be happy to answer more of those for you. Oh, just had one about practice tests. Yes, the practice tests are available. The science tests are coming soon, since that is a new assessment. They're being developed and should be out near the end of February. The PARCC assessments are available online right now, but will be in the practice site for Pearson's training site. I think at the end of next week. It should be pretty soon. So yes, there are resources available now, but they all should be filled in by the end of February. All right, administering the test. So we're going to talk about classroom setup, ensuring that accommodations and accessibility features are provided, and then administering the test to students and documenting any issues that arise. OSSE's goal is for schools and LEAs to have a uniform and equitable statewide assessment program, and to do that, we need to do our best to provide consistent, standardized conditions. We have lots of schools, lots of different things going on, and so there's a couple ways that we go about doing this. A lot of it is through classroom setup on the day of testing. As you can see here in this picture, there's a classroom that has some of the typical things you may have in your room. There's posters, there's schedules, there's books, there's student work. Some of these things are okay, and some of them are a bit of a challenge. We'll go through the details at test security training, and if you have any specific questions, feel free to direct them there or to Shannon. But generally speaking, we want to make sure that students don't have access to any sort of information that could contribute to their answers in a way that would be unfair to other students who are taking the assessment. So as you can see here, I've highlighted some things like an equation that's up on the wall, a formula, student work, things like steps for success where we talk about strategies. We don't want to have those up. Students should have internalized those. Posters with timelines and life cycles and information about the content that could be on the assessment, and also students who have their devices really close together. Obviously, we don't want them to be able to see each other's tests. There's two different ways to fix that, one of which is cover it up. You can use dividers between students. You can use paper and just kind of cover things that are on your wall that are problematic and then take them down after testing is over for the day. You can also remove things, which sometimes is a little harder because we have things in our room that are pretty permanent, but you can separate students further and remove things from the wall that aren't supposed to be there. Things like a schedule that just says like what the students are doing that day, things like the name of your school, those shouldn't be an issue. And what you do see on the board with unit name and testing time, those are requirements. Those have to be posted for students during these two assessments, and there are specific directions in the test manual that tell the test administrator exactly what to write on the board. So there's a little box that looks just like what I have there that tells them what to write, and they put that up before testing. Oh, just talked about this. This information is in the manual, and it'll tell them to put this up on the board so every student has access to the information and knows what time the test is over. All right, so student desks. There are times where you may have students who want to have something at their desk that they shouldn't, including something like a cell phone or a novel. We want to make sure that students don't have these during testing. Those are prohibited materials, which again, you'll learn about more at test security training. You also may have some students who have materials that are for accommodations or accessibility features. They may have headphones because they're listening to text-to-speech on their math test, but the student sitting next to them isn't using text-to-speech, so they don't need headphones. They may have a calculator because they have a calculator accommodation, or some portions of the mathematics assessment do require a calculator, and it's built into the system. So there's one that's in the screen of the computer, but some students are more used to a handheld one and prefer to have that, so there's some flexibility there. Also, word-to-word dictionaries. Students may have a word-to-word dictionary if they're an EL student who is, having that accommodation for the assessment. So the accommodation materials are highlighted in red here. You may see those for your students. You may not, depends on what they need. Optional materials. These are perfectly fine to have, but not required. That would be dividers. Sometimes people give kids mints during testing. That's perfectly fine, as well as a reference sheet. Some of the assessments, I think mostly math for PARCC, have reference sheets. Again, they're built into the system just like a calculator, so students don't need to have them printed out, but they can print them out if you would like to have them in front of you when students are testing. You can do that. And then required materials. Students absolutely have to have their testing device if they're testing online, their student testing ticket, a pencil with an eraser or a supplemental eraser, and scratch paper. Scratch paper can be lined like you see here. It can be blank, or it can be graph paper for math. It should be similar to whatever students have been using in class, and it's not something where you can kind of create a structure like some sort of organizer. You just have to have blank paper, either with lines, graph, or with nothing on it. All right. Ensuring that all students with accommodations get what they need is extremely important. It is important for them to have access to those tools, and it also causes their test to be invalidated if they do not receive them. Usually we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So on the front end, test administrators who are providing accommodations, they should be trained. They should have a list or some sort of resource they can go to where they can see what accommodations are provided to their students, and know that they can administer them appropriately before testing begins. Again, misadministration of these accommodations can result in us saying, if you get through Unit 1 and you realize that a student has not had their calculator, but they're supposed to have a calculator, we have to reassign them a new test and have them start from the beginning. Not ideal for anyone. So check those on the front end. It is a huge thing that has a really strong impact when it goes wrong. So we want to make sure that it doesn't. One way to do that is on the back of the test administrator manuals, there's a list that you see here on the right with a bunch of codes. These are accommodations that are provided through the system. And when they are provided through the system, it shows up next to the student's name in Pearson Access Next. So if I'm giving a test and I have 20 kids and 3 of them should have text-to-speech, I can actually see that show up on the screen next to their name when I'm giving the test in my kind of dashboard of students. Great way to check and make sure that they are getting what they need so they don't raise their hand 10 minutes later and say, I already started and I don't have what I need. That's not ideal. All right, the manuals. So as I mentioned, the manuals are now available online at DC My Pearson Support, I think. I'll find the link towards the end. I think it shows up on a later slide. But there are 2 different manuals that are used by test administrators. One's for paper-based testing, which is an accommodation. The other's for computer-based testing, which is the vast majority of students. They include testing scripts. It is really important that testing scripts are read verbatim to students. There are no modifications that can be made. There are sections in there that, clarify each piece of the way at the beginning of testing, during a break, at the end of testing, what needs to be said, so that, again, we have that consistent experience. Test administrators and proctors should be actively monitoring during testing, and they are not able to view student content. So they shouldn't be looking at the screen of the student who's testing or the paper of the student who's testing unless they're providing an accommodation that requires it. If my accommodation says read aloud, I'm going to need to read the test to the student. So then I would have access, but otherwise they shouldn't. They're not able to coach students during testing, and we talk in detail about what this looks like during test security training. And if there are questions or concerns about breaks, they outline policies for those inside of the manuals. All right, test coordinators and technology coordinators and special education coordinators should all be kind of actively monitoring during testing, making sure that things are going well, supporting the team, answering questions, being in a location where they're easily accessible. If anything does go wrong, document it. If you are concerned about it, contact OSSE. We'll cover the types of things you contact us for and the types of things you don't during test security training. But want to make sure that you're monitoring what's going on and you're there to support your team. For test coordinators and technology coordinators, there may be a situation where a device does not function the way it should. For this reason, and this reason alone, you are the only people who are able to have a cell phone on your person or on in a testing environment. Test administrators cannot have them on. They cannot be walking around with them. Students certainly cannot have them. You can, because you may need to call Pearson about a particular issue. And so you are able to move around with that. It is not for your staff to communicate with you on. It is for you to contact Pearson. All right. Make sure that your staff know that you'll probably set a policy for how they report incidents to you, but they also can report them directly to OSSE. Anyone can report an incident. Make sure it's kind of a clear and open system, and people know that they don't have to go to you. They could come directly to us if they're concerned about anything. Information on how to report incidents is listed on our link on this page. Monitoring. So OSSE staff visit schools during testing. We want to get a sense of what's happening in the district across schools, if there are any issues in terms of training that we can improve to provide better guidance on what should be happening. And so we visit. We are there to observe. We don't provide feedback while we're there. We're not there to kind of answer lots of questions or disrupt anything. We're just there to watch. And so we'll ask a few questions at the beginning to make sure that we have a sense of how you've been keeping your files and where you've been keeping things stored. and then we'll just observe students during testing, quietly move in and out of rooms that we need to visit. If you have any questions after a visit, you can contact me, but there isn't a whole lot of information we provide. It's not like we're going to give you a score or give you a big piece of feedback. If we saw anything that was egregious, we would certainly reach out to let you know, but mostly we're just there to kind of check out what's going on. After testing, there's a couple of things that can happen. Students can stay in the room, which is pretty common, and do a quiet activity, or they can leave as they finish. If they are going to stay in the room, I said quiet, I should have said silence. They can silently work on unrelated content from what's being tested in the room. So we like to say if a student is doing a math test, they can work on a crossword puzzle, or if they're doing an ELA test, they can work on a Sudoku puzzle, something that isn't related to what's happening in the rest of the room for students who are still testing. They may read a book, they may draw or color, or they can work on one of those worksheets that's not related to testing content. So those are all options. All right, I see a few questions that popped up. Let me take a look here. I have a question about calculators. It says if students use their physical calculators, do they need any sort of waiver or accommodation? I don't believe so. I believe that that's an accessibility feature, but you can check in the manual for that. I think if they're just using it kind of as a replacement for what's already on the screen, there's some compatibility matches. It needs to make sure that it's the same type. It's not like a graphing calculator for a student who should be using something far more simple, but those requirements should be listed in the manual. The testing manuals online are available on the website that I'll show you at the end. Somebody asked if teachers are able to keep a list of accommodations that students are using during testing. That's a great question, because we know that student accommodations are a reflection sometimes of their IEP, and we want to make sure that we're respectful of student information and not having that information get out into the world where it shouldn't. And so yes, you can have that. It's probably a good idea to have people sign those in and out if that's the system you're going to use, so that it's with their secure testing materials. It gets sent out with them when they pick up the materials, it gets collected when they're done, and it gets locked up with other secure information. So that's a great question. And someone asked about the criteria as to whether a student should do computer-based or paper-based testing. Computer-based testing is basically the requirement unless a student has an IEP that says that they can take paper-based testing. So the vast majority of DC students take computer-based tests. If they have an IEP that says they should take a paper-based test, that would be the requirement for that. All right. Testing closeout. We're almost near the finish line for testing. So when we close out testing, we want to stop test sessions and do some things in the system that just kind of wraps up testing and finalizes it. Then we have a bunch of materials, so we need to figure out where they go and what we do with them. And then we submit documentation to complete our test security work with OSSE. So let's start with closing out test sessions. This is all done in Pearson Access Next. You'll close any tests that remain open, which may be because a student just forgot to submit it, or maybe a student wasn't there for the last unit, they were absent, they didn't get to actually finish their test, you just kind of close that for them. And then you'll do something called stopping test sessions. I'll show you what this looks like during our next training, and you'll be able to see it in the Pearson Access Next system. It's pretty clear. Materials, there's some materials that get shredded, some get recycled, and some get returned. We shred materials that are secure in some way, but don't need to get returned to Pearson because they don't have testing content on them. So that would be student testing tickets, scratch paper that students used where they wrote down notes about what they were doing on the test, and then math reference sheets. If they wrote notes on them as if they were scratch paper, shred those too. If they didn't write anything on them, those can be part of the recycle group along with manuals. Those can just be recycled. They're not a material that needs to be locked away because they're public and they're online. And then there's some like paper rulers and cardboard things that Pearson sends for some paper-based testing. Those kinds of things can be recycled as well, as long as students didn't write on them. Secure test materials to return. We do have a label that we put on those items. They'll say secure materials shipped to Pearson in one of the corners of the document so that you can differentiate them clearly. This involves answer sheets. Obviously for the answer sheets for PARCC, those go back to Pearson to get scored. A little note about DC Science: if you have students who are taking paper for DC Science because of an accommodation, their tests actually don't get scored by Pearson. They get transcribed into TestNav 8 by the school test coordinator and an additional person who's with them for that process. It is not super common that you would be a person who had a student with the DC Science paper-based test, but if you do, we will reach out to you to talk more about those details. All right, student test booklets, those get shipped back to Pearson. And human reader scripts, which is basically a script that has a lot of information from the test. Because it's practically the test, we ship that back to Pearson too, so they can account for all those materials and make sure that information about the test isn't floating around outside of their control. Directions for shipping are outlined in the manuals. Scoreable materials, those would be those PARCC materials that are getting scored, get shipped back to Pearson by May 24th. That's a week after paper-based testing ends for PARCC. And then non-scoreable materials get shipped to Pearson no later than May 31st, again, 5 days after PARCC testing ends. And for DC Science, June 7th, 5 days after science ends. You are welcome to combine these materials if you want to send them earlier. That is something that a lot of people will probably do, and the earlier the better. If there are things that you don't send back, Pearson and OSSE will start calling you. We track each item. We'll be saying, where are the 2 test booklets that were extra? Those types of things. So keep track of everything and return it as quickly as you can, and then you'll be all wrapped up and we won't need to bother. All right. Documentation at the end of testing, there is something called a test security affidavit that gets sent in for all tests, including PARCC and DC Science. It's due 10 business days after the last day of testing. And your test security file that I mentioned before, you'll just want to make sure everything that you need to put in there is in there and ready to go. You can kind of seal it up for those 4 years or put it away somewhere so that hopefully we don't need to use it in any way, but it's there if we do. Test security investigations will be talked about a little bit at test security training. It's rare, but does happen. If we find some sort of anomaly or an issue, OSSE may complete an investigation with your school, which is why we ask you to be so careful with all these things and why we ask you to keep that test security file. So if your school is part of that process, Shannon would reach out to you directly after testing is complete. But until you hear from her, not much need to worry about it as long as you're following the directions that were given and doing the things you should. All right, next steps. Training. Hopefully this training provided some good context for you. If you would like more information about any particular topic, feel free to join in on additional trainings. I will be hosting the Pearson Access Next 101 training in just a few minutes. It is a separate webinar link. I won't be jumping straight from this one. We'll take a quick break and give you a chance to log into the other one if you'd like to join. There's also a number of workshops we'll be doing to just kind of sit down and go through processes that can be a little tricky in the Pearson system, so feel free to sign up for those as well. Here's a list in detail of some of those things specifically related to PARCC and DC Science. We'll also have some webinars closer to testing, just kind of reminders. This is a very long, wide process, and talking about it here in January may be hard to remember in April. So we have some training in March to just kind of go over what it's like to do this work during testing, and then a little reminder about closeout procedures in May when you're wrapping up testing many months from now. Here's a list of contacts. You may have met some of the people on my team. I'm Cassie Lynett. I cover PARCC. DC Science is run by Daniel Alcazar-Roman. He is working really hard at building this wonderful assessment, so I've been covering a lot around administration, but either of us can help you with your needs around these 2 assessments. There's also a number of other people on our team, like Shannon, who works with test security, our director, Danielle Branson, Michael, who works with special populations. So if you see us, introduce yourself. We love to get to meet people and put faces with names that we email all the time, but our email and our phones are ready if you have questions or concerns. Here's some of the resources I mentioned before. Obviously, you're going to be using the Pearson Access Next site, and you'll be using those manuals. I linked them here, but if you look a few lines down where it says Pearson DC portal, that's the link where you can find the manuals, dc.mypearsonsupport.com. There's lots and lots of things there. It's going to be a lot of resources that you'll use during testing, so do check that out. There's also a Pearson Support customer line. If you have any questions, please call them. We can sometimes provide support, but if it comes to like a system is doing something funky and you're not sure how to fix it, a file won't upload, a student can't be found, call them. They are the best resource for helping out with those things. So all these links and resources, I'll send these slides to you so that they're available. All right, I'm just going to check and see if there's any additional questions. If you have any at the close here, feel free to put them in the question box. Somebody asked about the weekly newsletter, and if they don't get it, how do they sign up? The weekly newsletter is something that comes directly from my email. It's called the Next Generation Assessment Bulletin. The way that we send it out is actually through contacts in eSchool Plus. eSchool Plus is a system OSSE uses that's usually managed by your data manager. What they do is they add you in as a point of contact for assessment or as an LEA assessment manager, and anyone who's on that list in those roles gets added to our list every week. So check with them and make sure that you're on the list. If you don't get it, it has lots of updates, reminders about deadlines, very helpful in terms of resources for all of our assessments. Someone else just asked if I can send the slide deck. I absolutely will send that to you before I wrap up for the day so that you have access to all the information we looked at today. All right, those are all the questions I saw. Again, if you're interested in Pearson and you haven't used it before, Pearson Access Next, please join me in a few minutes. We'll get started with Pearson Access Next 101. Thanks so much, everybody.